Coming up on Varsity Sports, we relive Friday's best action, including a battle for the pole position in the EDC and an ESD blow-up.
We'll hear from some of the top AAA coaches in North Dakota as they prepare for Saturday's big battles.
We'll recap some big-time plays and big-time performances.
And as always, we make our picks on the biggest games of the week. Next on Varsity Sports.
And how is everybody doing? I'm Jay Elson. He's Jason and Darren. Believe it or not, we've reached the home stretch of the high school football regular season in North and South Dakota.
Oh, I believe it. The leaves are starting to fall. The teams are starting to play their best, which every coach told us in August. We're waiting to play our best in the playoffs, and you can tell these teams are ramping up for an important stretch right before the end of the regular season.
I'm sure there's a better time in the high school sports season.
There's
spring, fall, winter, doesn't matter.
Love
I
it.
think this is it right here. All right, well, we kick things off tonight, as we do every week, with a look back at the week that was in high school football. And in South Dakota, Del Rapids restated its case as a contender in Class A, while the top-ranked team in 11 AAA surged past one of the ESD's best. And that's where we begin our Varsity Sports South Dakota Rewind. Lincoln didn't play its cleanest game on Friday, but still managed to keep its perfect season intact against Harrisburg. The Patriots overcame a couple of first-quarter turnovers to build a 14-0 halftime lead, and they would put it away with a couple of early second-half touchdowns. Nickel Myers led the way offensively, catching 7 passes for 131 yards and 2 scores as Lincoln beats Harrisburg 35-14.
In ESD play, Yankton didn't look like a team that was playing for the third time in 8 days. The Bucks absolutely dominated Pierre, putting up 461 yards of total offense en route to an impressive 37-0 shutout. Arlen Lickness's team, which clinched a share of the ESD title with that victory, has now outscored their opponents 81-0 over the last 10 quarters.
Our kids came ready to play tonight, which is a credit to them. And the good thing is we've stayed completely healthy through the whole, from last Friday to this Friday.
It was also a big night for Brookings. The Bobcats ran all over Mitchell, piling up 442 yards on the ground. Gerald Maxwell was responsible for 213 of that on just 11 carries. Mikey Daniel added 127 and 5 touchdowns as Brookings steamrolls Mitchell 62-20 to improve to 5-2 overall and 4-1 in the ESD.
Couple of really good teams in the ESD right now. Let's move on to 11A. 2 of their top teams crossed paths in Del Rapids. This was the tale of 2 halves. West Central won the first half and led 17-6 at the break, but the second half was all Warriors. Riley Schmidt led the way. The senior finished with 211 yards and 3 touchdowns as Del Rapids rallies to beat their arch rival 34-25.
This is absolutely huge. We haven't really had a big game like this to win. Madison, we lost first game of the season, so this was really big for us. We're really gonna feed off of this one right here.
The second half, we got the ball, we came out, and we got some things to work for us, and I think our kids got some confidence, and I think they went to work, and they played hard, they didn't let up, and that the difference was I thought our front line did a nice job, and our kids just kept working hard.
Dual and Hamlin were tied at 6 at halftime, but the second half belonged to the Chargers, who pull away for a 32-6 win over previously unbeaten Dual. Hamlin rode their quarterback's arm and legs as Brody Grantham piled up 169 yards on the ground and threw for 128 more. He also had a hand in 4 total touchdowns. Hamlin remains one of 4 unbeaten teams in 9B as they travel to Webster to finish out their regular season on Friday.
It's a big win. We haven't played a lot of teams this year that have given us a challenge. That was a good challenge for our team. Going forward in the playoffs, we're going to have a lot more games like that. We're going to need to play like that coming out in the second half. Came out good, came out fast, and we won that second half.
Yeah, we made it to the Dome last year and fell short. I guess our ultimate goal is to get back. I mean, that's our goal. We want to be back there and we want another shot at the title, I guess. And then, our kids have worked hard for it, and hopefully we can get through the playoffs and get there.
All right, well, later on, we'll look back at some of last week's top individual performances. But up next, we get you caught up on Friday's action from Minot all the way to Fargo.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by AE Tech Electrical Training Center in Rapid City. Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Shields.
And welcome back to Varsity Sports. Jay Elson, Jason, and Errol. We've surveyed the scene in South Dakota, and now we move north for our weekly review of last week's action in our Varsity Sports North Dakota Rewind. This biggest battle of the year to date in the EDC was the West Fargo Packers and the Fargo Davies Eagles. This game certainly lived up to the hype. Both defenses came to play in this battle for field position. Davies took their first lead of the game with 2:06 left to play in the fourth quarter with a Hartness-to-Hartness touchdown, giving the Eagles a 14-13 win. Both teams have one loss in the conference with just 2 games left in the regular season.
The other team to beat in that EDC, Fargo South, jumped all over Grand Forks Central to a 28-0 first quarter lead. They ended up piling up 49 points in the first half of that game. The Bruins ran for 305 rushing yards in their 49-13 win over the Knights. James Johannesson ran for 178 of those yards and scored 3 times. Ty Brooks also scored 3 touchdowns, 2 receiving, 1 more rushing, and South now tries to stay unbeaten against their rivals, Davies, on Saturday.
Bismarck stayed perfect with a big second half push. This game tied at 14 late in the second quarter, but that's when the Demons used a Jackson Ford explosion to blow the game wide open. Ford ran for 107 yards, caught 5 passes for 126, and scored 4 total touchdowns and the 50-14 win over the Magi.
The Saints jumped out to a big lead with 27 first quarter points against Stanley Powers Lake. St. Mary's definitely has depth in their backfield. They ran for 348 yards on the ground, led by Dylan Reiner. He had 137 and 3 touchdowns. The Saints keep their unbeaten streak up to 7, still undefeated on the season.
4 different Deacons scored 5 touchdowns in Shanley's 35-6 road win over Central Cass. Danny Stock scored 2 second-half touchdowns to pull away from the Squirrels. You can watch this game, by the way, in its entirety following Varsity Sports on Wednesday night. Well, there are a couple of huge matchups coming up this weekend in Class 3A in North Dakota. We'll hear from the coaches when we come back.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by AE Tech Electrical Training Center in Rapid City. Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Shields.
Well, there are a number of really good late-season matchups on the docket this week between North and South Dakota. We want to take a look at some of those right now. Let's start in South Dakota, Jason, with a big matchup in the 9-man ranks.
Yeah, we've got a couple undefeateds. In fact, there's still quite a few undefeated teams left in 9-man football, but Howard and Canastota, 2 of the best. One in 9A, that's Howard. One in 9B, that's Canastota. But it's a good place to get some measuring stick. And then you see a couple ESD battles, and always the last game of the regular season, you see the Sioux Falls schools kind of finishing off their inter-city play, I guess you want to say. All of the games should be interesting, and this week you can't beat good rivalries like this.
Absolutely. And the North Dakota side of things, Shiloh Christian travels to Grant County Flasher, Hazen, Killdeer, Oaks, and Carrington is one a lot of people are excited about in Class A.
Yeah, Oaks and Carrington, a couple undefeated teams in Class A, which I don't know if I quite expected them to be this good at this point in the season. Hazen, Killdeer, those are teams that we've had 1-2 in those power rankings almost all season long, so that will go a long way. I think Hazen's on a 27-game winning streak right now. Killdeer is going to try to take matters into their own hands.
Well, there's a couple of big ones coming up in AAA as well, and it's time to take a closer look at those right now. We'll start with the big one in Bismarck, BHS and Century, scheduled for 7 o'clock Saturday at the Bismarck Community Bowl. Century comes into the game with a record of 3-3, and we asked their head coach, Ron Wingenbach, what kind of problems he expects Bismarck to pose for his team this weekend.
Well, I think it's their rushing game, and then, of course, they mix that in so well with play-action pass, but, you know, everything is predicated off of the run. Defensively, they're going to fly around, and I think the one thing that as I watch them on film this year, they're very athletic, numbers 1 through 11, and I think that creates havoc anytime you're a team that likes to throw the ball, and we're probably close to a 50-50 pass run, and I think the one thing that we're going to have to do is make sure that we secure the ball and not give them any extra opportunities.
On the other side, Bismarck has been playing very well. The Demons have outscored their opponents by an average of 53-13. That's only through 6 games. But Mark Gibson knows Century, which has battled a lot of injuries this season, is a team you can never take lightly.
You know, I think there's not many teams that can have a caliber of quarterback like Dalton Feeney go down, and probably a guy that's equal as good as any quarterback in the league step in for him. You know, Kraft is, you know, we had our hands full with him last year in the semis, and the one thing about him, he's a hard-nosed, tough kid, and you know, it's not going to just take 1 or 2 guys to tackle him. We're going to have to be very aware where he's at, and the one thing that he's added to his ability is his ability to throw the football. He's starting to get his timing down the receivers. They've got some great athletes on the perimeter, and you know, I think, you know, everybody's looking at records. You can throw records out in this game because the bottom line is whoever wins this is basically the 1 seed in the West, and you know, we're certainly not going to listen to people and what they're talking about, and I hope our kids play hard and we come ready to play, because if we don't, we're going to get beat.
Well, both coaches respect the other coaches, and this has been a traditional game for many years. But what I look at when I see these two teams face off is a couple really good quarterbacks. Chris Kraft for Bismarck Century has done an outstanding job. Started the year out mostly playing defense and a little bit of fullback. Now he's a full-fledged quarterback, and that's a guy that Mark Gibson, I know, is worried about stopping. And on the other side, I think Hayden Gibson has played just as well as any quarterback in the state. It's rare that you have a quarterback that you can trust so much that he can actually call his own plays. I mean, Mark Gibson said he let Hayden call his own plays for the first time in his coaching career last week against Williston, 2 weeks ago against Williston. So that's a great combination there. So the quarterbacks in this game are going to be outstanding.
Yeah, hopefully that lends to a good football game, because that's what everybody wants to see when these two teams go head-to-head. All right, well, the other big game in Class AAA is in Fargo as defending champions South visits Davies. Jason Thielges and the Eagles have won 6 of their first 7 games this season, including last week's nail-biter against West Fargo. And while this may be his team's toughest test yet, Thielges says his players are looking forward to that challenge.
Oh, no, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Yeah, it's, you know, I think ever since last year we've been looking forward to it. And I know our kids are going to play extremely hard, and I know their kids will play extremely hard. And there's a lot of talent on both sides of the football, and I mean, it should make for a heck of a game. I mean, you know, they got some guys that are tremendously talented over there that we've got to find a way to slow down. And I think in the same way they look at us and say, you know, we got some guys that are going to cause them some problems, and they need to slow down. So it should be a heck of a football game.
The talent Davies possesses certainly isn't lost on South. Head coach Troy Mattern says his Bruins are well aware of the damage guys like Aiden and Tristan Hartness can do to his team.
We definitely have to key on them. You know, we have to, especially in our secondary, we got to mix up our looks. We can't be in the same coverage and the same look every time, because he's going to pick us apart. And we know that his brother's his number one receiver, and we got to make sure, you know, we mix up our looks with him too, to not always do the same thing. And you know, but the biggest thing is we just got to play the game. You know, we know he's going to make his plays, and we know his brother's going to make his plays. We just got to limit the big plays. You know, we got to make sure that they march if they're going to score, they got to march themselves down the field and complete a drive. We just can't allow those big plays like they've done throughout the season.
Well, there's no doubt that this game is going to feature some of the biggest and brightest stars that North Dakota has not only had this year, but over the past several years. You're talking about Aiden Hartness, Tristan Hartness. Those guys are rock stars for Fargo Davies. And then on the other side, you've got 2 future D1 big-time talents in Ty Brooks and James Johannesson. But with all that talent on the field, I think it's going to come down to defense. And both of these 2 teams said they've been playing their best defense just over this last week or 2. And that really could be the point that tips this game.
And it's an encouraging sign for both of those programs as they move forward toward the postseason. Everybody wants to play good defense in the playoffs, because a lot of times that's the difference between winning a championship and going home a little early.
It's so true, and there's not going to be very many surprises on these 2 teams, as a lot of these coaches coached together back at Fargo South over the past few years before the split, and they talk about we're not going to slip anything by the other team, that's for sure. We're just going to go out and see who executes the best.
It's a fun new rivalry up in
It
Fargo.
definitely
Certainly guys that know each other very, very well. All right, well, we're looking forward to both of those games. Bismarck High and Century, South and Davies, both scheduled for Saturday in Fargo and in Bismarck. If you'd like to hear more from the head coaches of these games, we posted the full interviews on our blog. Go to midcosn.com and click on blog to listen to those. All right, well, we will make our picks on these games, plus a few more a little bit later on in the show. But up next, we'll unveil some of the top performances from last week on the high school gridiron. You're watching Varsity Sports.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by AE Tech Electrical Training Center in Rapid City. Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Shields.
Well, earlier we recapped how some of the top teams fared last week, but how about the individuals? Let's look at who put up the biggest numbers last Friday night, starting in South Dakota, and a couple of guys from Roosevelt have to head your list here.
Yeah, hard to pick out who really had some of the best weeks, but you look at what Chase Vinatieri did in pretty much one half of play. 6 catches, 142 yards, 4 touchdowns, all in the first half. He came back in a big way. And then I have to mention what Jake Como has been doing week after week. Look at these numbers. Pretty similar to what he's been doing over the entire season, but he's at a 75% clip throwing the ball, 199 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's been near perfect.
A couple of guys from Bismarck highlight the list in North Dakota.
Yeah, Jackson Ford took this game into his own hands. Not only running the ball, he didn't have to run too often, but when he did, he made it happen. A couple touchdowns, a couple big touchdowns. And then receiving, he put in 126 yards there and another touchdown. Hayden Gibson, by the way, doesn't get to throw the ball a lot, but when he does, he is very effective and had another big night.
All right, well, there are a number of great games on the schedule this weekend, and when we come back, Jason and I will offer up our picks for 4 of them. We'll also let you know who we think should be on upset alert. That's coming up next.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by AE Tech Electrical Training Center in Rapid City. Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Shields.
And welcome back to Varsity Sports. We wrap things up tonight with our Varsity Sports Pigskin Pick'em segment. And boy, what a battle we've got going on, huh?
You're coming back strong, Jay. The upset picks have been solid for you all season long, and that's been the difference so far.
1, as a matter of fact, is the difference on the scorebook, but we could see that change here over the next couple of days. We'll see 4 games to pick, 2 from North Dakota, 2 from South Dakota. We start in Class A in North Dakota. Battle of unbeaten teams as Oaks travels to Carrington.
Last year, these two met up, and Oaks thoroughly dominated Carrington, 39-0, and that was because of their, at the time, junior quarterback Bryce Meal, who is back as a senior this year. He's gone 1,125 yards through the air. He's got 400-plus yards running. He's a force to be reckoned with. I mean, Carrington has some players too, trust me, but nobody like Bryce Meal. I think Oaks wins this game.
Meal's a great player, but I think defense might be the difference in this game, and I think that favors Carrington a little bit. They're giving up an average of about 6 points per game so far this season. Oaks is giving up around 21 per game. Both these teams have pretty good offenses, so I think the defense could swing it one direction or the other, and I think that favors Carrington. Yes, at home.
You might have convinced me to switch.
Well,
not quite.
Too late now. All right, Class AAA in North Dakota. Fargo South at Davies, an afternoon start for this one.
Really looking forward to this one. Both teams featuring not the best defense throughout the year, but last week both teams stepped up their defense big time, and they both think they're peaking on defense at the right time. Both teams have great offensive lines. Fargo South with the big offensive line, Davies with that athletic offensive line. It's going to be a fun matchup to see who stops whose star. You got Aiden Hartness on one side, you got JJ and Ty Brooks on the other side. I think in the end, Fargo South will get this thing done, but don't be surprised if the Hartnesses have something to say in the fourth quarter.
I agree that they very well could, but I like the game changers on the Bruins side with Brooks and Johannes just a little bit better in this head-to-head matchup. That being said, I was impressed with Davies getting a win against West Fargo last week. We thought this 3-game stretch of theirs late in the season was going to tell us a lot more about them than the first 5 games did. And so a good win for them, albeit a 1-point victory. But I like South in this particular matchup. Moving to South Dakota Class 11 AAA, Roosevelt at O'Gorman, all west side affair in Sioux Falls.
O'Gorman's getting better. They're getting healthier right now. Roosevelt might be on the other side where They're trying to patch up a few injury problems, but I do think Roosevelt, they've got a fortunate thing having Jet Thune as their backup quarterback, because he has come in and absolutely done a fantastic job for the Riders. They have barely skipped a beat from losing their top player, maybe the top player in the state, and I think they still have enough even to play on the MAC on Friday night and get this thing done.
You mentioned Jet Thune. I think Chase Vinatieri's taken his game up another level. He was always good with Taryn Christian, but I think he's really stepped up in a spot. He recognized the fact that his team really needed a little extra something out of him, and he gave it to him. Last week we saw him score 4 touchdowns against Stevens in the first half. Granted, it's Stevens.
But
6 catches, 142 yards, and 4 touchdowns is impressive in one half of football. I don't care who you're playing. I like Roosevelt to get the win at O'Gorman as well. Finally, in Class 11 AA, a good ESD matchup here, Harrisburg at Yankton.
Yeah, speaking of finding out a lot about a team in a stretch, Harrisburg has got an unbelievably tough stretch, and they've proven that they can play with the big dogs, haven't proved that they can beat a big dog, and I think Yankton is that big dog. I've probably underestimated the Bucks a little bit, but that team has been so impressive over this last week and a half. I got to go with the Bucks at home.
You know what? Yankton was one of those teams where I wasn't convinced for whatever reason. I recognized that they were a good football team, but I needed to see a little something. And you mentioned this last week and a half. I've seen what I need to see at this point. They've outscored their opponents 81-0 over the last 10 quarters of football, including that just sheer dominant effort up in Pierre last week. I like Yankton to get the win at home. Finally, quickly, upset picks of the week.
Grafton's on their way up. I think they get a road win against Wahpeton, taking them out of the rankings.
I like also in Class 2A in North Dakota, but I like Beulah over Bishop Ryan. Bishop Ryan has yet to lose this season.
Sneaky good pick. I like that.
Beulah is pretty tough, and their losses are to Hazen and St. Mary's. So they're battle tested. I think they're ready for this. I think at home, just give them a slight little edge. I think they knock off Bishop Ryan. All right, that's going to do it for us for this week. For Jason Andera, I'm Jay Elser. Remember to tune in Friday night for another edition of Varsity Sports Live.